Hi everyone, this is Mari Craig, and you're listening to the Small Steps to Wellness show, a podcast where we discuss how we can achieve more wellness in our lives one small step at a time. For the past 6 odd years, I've taken a special interest in nutrition and I've changed the diet of my family on its head. But as I've dived deeper into the world of nutrition, I have learned that health is so much more than just what we put on our plate. This is why on this podcast we will be talking nutrition, mental health, being in alignment, holistic health care, self care, raising children, and more. We will also be hearing stories of women's journeys to overcome trauma and what it has taught them on the way. When we share our stories, we realize we are not alone and that things can change for the better. I'm so glad to have you with me on this journey as I explore what health and wellness truly encompass. If you like what you're hearing, please consider rating the show with a 5-star rating and sharing it with your friends. It really makes a big difference. Now, on with today's show.
So,
Hi, and welcome to the Small Steps to Wellness show with me, your host, Mari Craig, where we are discussing how we can achieve wellness in our lives, one small step at a time. Now, today I'm joined by Sarah Griffith, and we are going to talk about fuzzy eaters and how we can support parents to help their children eat a more varied diet. So I have to tell you, Small Steps to Wellness, it is not just about your wellness, it's about your children's wellness. And obviously, when your children are happy, you're happy, aren't you? Sarah Griffith is the founder of Feel Better Families and the Family Mealtime Revolution. She works with parents who want healthier, happier meal times, but have found this difficult to achieve because of their child's fussy eating. Sarah is a mom of two like me, including one former picky eater. And she's a certified health coach, parenting mentor, and children's eating specialist. She wants to support and empower parents to take action if they are unhappy with what their children eat, because she knows mealtimes can be easier, healthier, and more enjoyable, even if their child is a fussy eater. And I'm so excited to have you on. Welcome, Sarah.
hi, Mari. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here. And I should probably say, first of all, that I'm also one of your clients, because as weird as it might sound, and I've had so many people commenting on it to me, even if you know all the right things to do food-wise, it's not always easy to implement it when you have a fussy eater. So glad for your help. But let's, before we hit the record on this show today, both of us said don't like the term fussy eater. Why do you not like it?
Yeah, that's quite a big question, actually, because I think there's a lot of layers to why it can be unhelpful. I mean, first of all, this idea that we're labeling someone and, we can become what we are labeled as. And we know we all have this inbuilt negativity bias. So we tend to pick up on the things we're looking out for. And if we see our child very much in that fussy eating bracket, we're looking out for all the things they won't eat, all the things that they're being fussy about. And, we can end up really missing the good stuff that might be going on, or the opportunities that we have to build on the eating that they are doing and the good stuff that's happening. So there's that one thing about the label. Another thing too, I suppose, is around, I guess, the child themselves might come to, internalize that idea and find it difficult to break out of, what the rut that they're in, and feel even more cautious about trying new foods. And also, I think it does kind of diminish really what's going on in terms of all the different causes there might be behind your child's fussy eating. And it can almost seem like you're dismissing it as a behavioral thing, or almost like something that's maybe even a bit of a moral weakness, either with the child or a fault with the parent. It's got this kind of real negativity attached to it, hasn't it? That is super unhelpful for everyone concerned. And I know we can get into talking a lot more about these causes that underlie it and how it's a much more complex and sensitive issue than we might often realize. It's definitely worth bearing that in mind, I think, and not just dismissing it as like a bit of naughtiness or something that's quite wrong with your child or your parenting.
It's quite nice to realize that it's not as simple as that. I mean, it's daunting, but it's also nice to realize it's not my child trying to cause problems at meal times every single day. But when I introduced you, I said rather that so you're a mum of two, including one former picky eater. Is that your eldest or your youngest?
Yeah, it's my eldest daughter, actually.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how did that, yeah, go on.
No, you carry on.
No, I was going to say, how did that sort of, has she always been a, picky eater? How did it start? Because for me, it's my youngest. And so, for the youngest always gets compared to the oldest. And so they always try to look up to the oldest and kind of try to do what they are doing. And when they sort of can't, because of whatever issues they have, it's hard. But I guess it's equally hard for the older one if they see a younger child just doing all the right things and they realize themselves, I'm the older one, I should be, but I can't. So what has that been like in your house?
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock to me, frankly. I love food. I love eating. My husband as well. Neither of us would have thought of ourselves, I guess, as fussy in any way. And in fact, my eldest daughter, was great when she started weaning. It was like, wow, she just, it seemed to settle her. She seemed happier. So I was like, yes, food is the answer. Wonderful. It's all going brilliantly. Then I think it was about 18 months, it all changed. And this is so common in terms of one of the causes, the developmental cause, I think, is probably what was going on with my daughter predominantly. She started to, they need far fewer calories at that age than they used to. So they're naturally cutting down on their foods, but also they're developing this sort of defense mechanism, which makes them, or can make them, neophobic, so afraid of new foods. Really to protect themselves. That's what we think is going on anyway. And also there's that whole toddler thing developing too, asserting their independence and testing boundaries and testing how things work, all that really natural, normal, good stuff. And unfortunately that can come out, I have subsequently learned, in fussy eating type behaviors. And that's certainly what seemed to be happening with my daughter. Wow. So I had no idea how to deal with it. I was completely unprepared, as I think probably most parents are, because it's something that just isn't really talked about. And I knew what I should be feeding her, like you were saying early on. We know what we should be doing, but in practice that just might not seem possible. So that was definitely something that we were going through together. It lasted for ages. I think I didn't make her life particularly pleasant. I was constantly pressuring her to eat. I was kind of obsessed with how much she was eating, and I didn't want her to be, quote, fussy. I was like, no, this isn't going to be happening. It's this sort of battle situation. Mealtimes went on for ages. The poor girl, she would gag at foods that she didn't like, but I'd kind of insist that she should eat some. And it's looking back, now knowing, and this is one of the things about parenting, isn't it? We make mistakes, and we have to accept them and live with them. That's part of our experience. But my daughter is now 17, I should say.
Oh, yes.
And so, we've had the chance to talk about this. And it's been, in terms of me modeling how to, make mistakes and repair those, and that I'm human and that we're all learning all the time. I guess I try and take the good from that, in that I've been lucky enough to have that opportunity. But I know that if I'd have addressed this sooner and learned more sooner about what could be done in an effective way, then absolutely I could have made her eating experience so much better. She's great now.
But it's tricky though, isn't it? Because we only know what we know. But I'm assuming you weren't a health coach at the time. So is this what got you into health coaching? Yeah,
it's one of the things, certainly. I'd say it was the predominant thing. Although it's weird because health coaching wasn't what I immediately alighted upon. I just had this idea about working with families to help them around nutrition. And actually the trigger for it was a slightly odd, like little incident where my child, and my youngest daughter actually, took a picture one morning of the packed lunch I was making. And I was like, why are you doing that? Thinking it was some project at school. And she's like, oh no, one of my friends has asked for a picture so that she can show her mum because she wants and I was like, oh, okay. So first of all, I was like, cringing a bit, thinking, God, that mum probably hates me.
Were you cutting out the sandwiches?
I wasn't actually. I think it was some kind of like rice salady thing with all sorts of bits thrown into it. But it was anyway. Yeah. So she, after I'd sort of felt this kind of, oh my God, that poor other mum who gets this picture from this annoying woman, I thought, I really should do something about this.
Yeah.
Because I love it. And so that was really, and at the time I was wanting to change my job, and so that really tipped me into looking for new things. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a coach, and she said, oh, I've heard of this health coaching thing, maybe you could use that to do what you're interested in. And so that's what got me looking at health coaching. And I realized, yes, this is a great discipline. Coaching is such a fantastic way to help people make lasting, sustainable change. But I did also have to supplement it, with some other things as well.
But I think what I like about coaching or being coached is that actually it empowers me to find the answers myself, which I really love. But is that when you got the help for your eldest daughter, or had you kind of worked it out by then?
No, I'd already worked it out by then, hence the lunch not being pretty cut out shapes or whatever. But yes, I had worked it out by then, so things were a lot better, in fact. But yes, I just felt I had this experience that had been so interesting to me, and something that I thought I really, I felt passionate about wanting to share with other parents, that you can do something to make a difference, because I think we're just told it's kind of natural. Kids just do this, they're just fussy, blah blah blah, there's nothing you can do. So not true. And I think it's such an unhelpful myth to perpetuate.
Yes, so, this is what I was going to ask you about that, because we spoke about that, didn't we? That we just kind of go, oh yeah, my child is like that. Oh, he'll pass. And then they get older and older and older, and they still only eat beige foods. And it's it becomes a real thing. My daughter said yesterday, no, it wasn't yesterday, because yesterday I went to Pizza Express for her birthday. So she definitely didn't say then, pizza is one of her foods. But she said it the night before. She said, with kind of crying, I just don't like the last part of the day at the dinner table. And we said, why is that? She said, because this. And that was kind of because we'd and it wasn't anything strange that I put on the plate. There was no mixed up sauces or anything. There were a few sort of oven baked veg, and there was chicken. And I said, but you like chicken? Said, yes, but and it's just completely overwhelming for her. And I think I don't want to anyway as a parent sit and just wait for that to pass when it's such a traumatic thing for her. And as you know, I've stopped telling her to eat. I've said to I would suggest you try, because you might like it, and if you don't like it, that's absolutely fine. It's completely up to you. If you want to try it or if you don't want to try it, but it might be a good idea, because I know that you like chicken. So in the end, she kind of, but she tries it on, and she tries to say, well, can I have something else? And I said, well, no, this is dinner. So she said, but I'm still hungry. And I said, there's still food on your plate, so you need to choose what you want to do about it. But this is actually dinner, and there's nothing awful. But it's horrible to sit and I just don't want to sit and wait for this to pass. I want to learn what I can do to make things more enjoyable for her. So I think this is really important that we get to talk about. But what are the most common issues then that you see parents approach you with?
Yeah, I think what we've just touched on is definitely one of the big ones, this idea that there's nothing you can do, so it gets left for a very long time, and it goes on and on. And I've been thinking about an analogy with learning to read and write, actually. And I feel like maybe 100 years ago, we were in this place where we kind of just expected children to somehow learn. And if they didn't, it was because they were stupid and they were punished maybe, or they were maybe made to stand in the corner or something like that, told off, or people thought they were being naughty. And I think it's kind of, we're still like that in terms of learning to eat. There's so little widespread understanding of the learning to eat process and the different challenges that some people might have, the sensitivities or the other underlying difficulties that might be there for children in learning to eat, and what we can do to help them. And that's massive. So that leaving it and just sort of, like we've been talking about already, treating it as this inevitable kind of annoying thing is definitely one of the most common ones. And that can often lead to pressure then, I think, being piled on children to eat, which, as we've been talking about in our conversations privately, is one of the things that really ends up entrenching fussy eating quite often, as opposed to what we want. And we're all wanting when we're doing this, and I did it myself, as I've said, we want our children to eat more, and that's why we pressure them. But it's really counterproductive. So that's a big one. And I think parents as well get into a situation too where they stop perhaps offering children different things, because it's easy to give them what they know they'll like. It's, that is so understandable. And again, this is something that can just help shrink the child's sort of food world a little bit more into those kind of limited list of safe foods. And totally get why this happens. But that's another really common thing actually that can contribute to fussy eating, kind of persisting or even getting worse actually.
I'm gonna segue a little bit because I know that for many children, mine is not so bad at the moment, because she's realized that it's not bad to have food on your plate that you don't like. But for many children, just even having food nearby that you're scared of, that's a big issue. Could you maybe, I remember when and if anyone wonders, I've said you have free rein to share any information about my child that we discussed, because there's nothing I won't share myself. But when we started talking about my youngest, you talked about, the stages that you might need to go through in order to have a food become acceptable. And I can't remember what the stages were now on top of my head. Was it something like just having the same food in the room, or what are the stages?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you're right. So being able to tolerate a food, first of all, is the first stage. So that can be just literally having it in the house, in the same room. And then it gets more personal, into the kind of field of vision around where you can see it. You might want to then start investigating a little bit. So perhaps prodding it with an implement, a knife or fork or whatever. Starting to smell it a little bit at that point too, maybe. So all your senses are getting engaged already. You can see, our sight, our smell, sense of touch then comes a little bit more maybe after you've prodded it with a fork, whatever, you might be willing to touch it with a finger. And then after that, you start to make progress more towards your face with the food. And when babies are learning,
that, we just basically bypassing all of that. We just go, right, here you go, eat it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be massive, particularly if a child does have, sensory processing challenges. That's huge, because we're asking them to put something straight into their mouth and swallow it. So just tasting it is one of the stages, but swallowing it is like really the very final step, when they're super unsure and it's possibly freaking them out completely, because they're like, I haven't had a chance to decide whether this is okay. And something like nails on a blackboard, for instance, we might all exactly shiver. We might all shiver when we even think of that. But imagine that might be what's happening with a child when they see this food where it looks or smells really to them like that equivalent of nails on a blackboard, and we're asking them to swallow it down.
And then God forbid they spit it out, because that's seen as disgusting. So I still have massive issues with that. But so we also spoke about when I decided I was going to work with you, that I realized, and I don't know if many parents realize this, but the more parents I speak to who have so-called fussy eaters, the more we realize it's not just food. There's a lot of other things. And you mentioned sensory issues. Could you just share a little bit more about that? So what is normally, or what is very often also present in the child's life, in addition to being, I'm trying to say something other than fussy eating, in addition to being a bit awkward around food?
Cautious, maybe.
Cautious, that's the word. Much better. Cautious.
So sensory is just one of the areas. There could be, I should say right from the get-go, there could be other causes too. So your child might have a medical issue, something like constipation, anything to do with the GI tract can cause fussy eating. Common childhood complaints. There might be something developmental going on, like I talked about with my daughter. There could even be something around trauma with food, a previous choking experience, so anything like that. But sensory can be something that's often worth considering, because even if it's not a cause, if your child has become a fussy eater for another reason, they can actually start to develop more sensory challenges as a result of that around food. So it's often worth thinking about. So I'm really glad you raised it actually. And we're all very different. We're all unique when it comes to how we process the information out there in the world. And we use our senses to do that. So our senses send information to our brains. So everything we do and see, understand about the world relies on our basic senses. And for those of us who go about our lives without many challenges in this area, we stay in a very nice, comfortable zone of tolerance when it comes to senses. Occasionally, like the nails on the blackboard, we're pushed out of that and it feels nasty. But for people, children who have more sensitivities and find, processing that sensory information more difficult for whatever reason, they are more often in that really uncomfortable place of feeling unpleasant, of feeling like this isn't tolerable for me. And so, yeah, it's in terms of thinking about your child's reaction to things, if they are having these sensitivities, it is well worth bearing in mind that it may genuinely be difficult for them to do what you're asking them to do. Yeah. And there's little things you can look out for. So in terms of eating specifically, stuff like not liking toothbrushing, for instance, is a very common thing to look out for. Finding textures challenging. Things around smells, cooking smells can often happen, to really upset a child who's particularly sensitive. Stuffing food into the mouth if a child needs extra sensory stimulation, because sometimes we need more rather than less. They might like the feeling of pressure, and so stuff food into their cheeks to get that feeling of pressure. Yeah, so there's all sorts of, and you're having strong taste preferences. It's all sorts of things that you might notice with your child around specifically eating that you think, oh yeah, they might seem a bit sensitive there. But they might have other sensitivities in their life too. It might be things to do with vision or hearing, or touch is a very common one that's related closely to taste as well. So yeah, these other things you might notice about their child, your child not liking certain textures, if they're wearing certain clothes, all these kinds of things, they might just add up to being a bit of a picture where you think, oh, you know what, maybe doing some sensory work with my child could help them.
Yeah. What are we talking then? What kind of sensory work?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would say actually that if this is a significant issue for you, if it's really, or for your child, really disrupting their ability to carry out their day-to-day tasks, if it's happening on a daily basis, and if you're really worried about it, it's worth going to see an occupational therapist who's trained in sensory issues and getting a specific set of activities to do with your child. But if it's a milder issue and it's not necessarily affecting day-to-day life, then yeah, there are all sorts of things you can do as a parent. And there's loads of advice actually on the internet, really good advice now. So sensory bins is a great one. I don't know if you've heard of those.
No.
So yeah, it's just making, for instance, a large container with different textured stuff inside it. So it could be a gritty texture like sand, could be a sort of softer texture like a dough or a foam, or it could be watery type texture, and playing with your child in that kind of, a sandpit actually is a sensory box. In fact, your garden is like a sensory bin as well. Playing with your child in those more sort of messy, different textures on a regular basis can really help them to organize their senses and get their senses used to being exposed to different textures.
Yeah, because it seems like there's a scary, I mean, certainly in our house, it seems like there's everything is a bit scary. And it's not like I want to be difficult, but it's like I'm actually concerned that this food is going to cause me, or I'm concerned that, I'm just thinking about clothes as well. Being from Norway, when you go to Norway in the winter, you wear wool. And I remember my youngest freaking out. She couldn't bear, even merino wool, she couldn't bear any wool on her body whatsoever. And so you're just like, wow, what do I do? What do I do? And it's not because she wants to be cold or she wants to be awkward, but it's just I cannot bear the thought of having wool on my body. Luckily, there's now bamboo underlayers, so that problem is kind of solved. But it's it's not because they want, and as you said earlier, it's not because they want to be awkward. It's a proper issue with actually touching and smelling and feeling and being near, and and I think it's important that you talk about this, that it's all connected, because it means hopefully that if you are able to address one thing with those sensory boxes you said, hopefully that can have a positive effect on the sensory issues that you might have with food as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, doing things like that away from the table, away from food is great. But also the stuff you can do with food too.
Yeah.
So yeah, cooking together is great. Even preparing veg, stuff like that. Anything where you're handling different textures, chopping stuff up, getting used to, to being exposed, like we talked about in a wider sense of the word, rather than just eating, is really helpful. So all that stuff is good stuff that you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some work to do. How are you helping families then? I mean, I know how you're helping me, but how do you generally help families? I come to you and say, my child won't eat. What is, how does it work?
Okay, so I work with parents one-to-one at the moment, and we start off really by looking at the basic sort of mealtime dynamic stuff before we move on to more specific things around their child and their child's needs, particular needs. And we do that over a course of 3 months. We have one-to-one sessions together, like I said, but there's also course material that I supply to parents so they can work through things in their own time as well when we're not talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And also they can always talk to me through email or messaging if they have any questions in between. So I try and be as supportive as I can, because I think parents will get the most out of the work that we do together when they can really tailor it to what's going on with their particular child.
Yeah.
Because all the children are different, all families are different, but it's a really complete methodology that I use, something called the REF methodology, which stands for relationship, environment, and food. So I think a lot of people think initially I might just give them meal plans or special recipes that will somehow their child will magically eat, perhaps, but no, it's the food really is a kind of a later part of it, and nutrition really is a kind of secondary part of it, that too. And there's so much other stuff, as we've been touching on, that's going on around the food, that when we get that in place and sorted out, then the food and the nutrition kind of takes care of itself much more easily.
Yeah, and this is interesting what you're raising, because I've noticed certainly that by just tweaking a few things, and I'm by no means there, but it's made for slightly nicer meals. But then we obviously forget and we go back to old habits and we put it all on the plate and serve it up, and she kind of goes, and it's tricky because what I remember we spoke about this, what we want our children to grow up and do is make healthy choices for themselves. And at the moment, we are making those choices for them, and instead of allowing them to kind of learn what it means to eat a healthy meal, for example. And I certainly notice now, by giving my daughter more autonomy, that she's still questioning, if what she's eaten is enough, or if it's good enough, or whatever. And it's certainly a learning process for her and for me. So she will come to me and say, what do you think? Is this okay? And I have to say to her, what do you think? Does this feel good for you? Have you eaten enough? Do you feel full? She goes, no, but I'm not so sure if I want to eat any more of that food. So I don't like it. As well. That's good. You need to choose that. You need to decide for yourself. It's such a big process. And it's interesting also what you're saying about it's not about nutrition. And certainly for me, as I said to you, I know my children are getting all the nutrients they need every day. For me, it's more about having mealtimes be something enjoyable, instead of a situation where there's conflict, where there's negativity, where there's arguments, all of those things. And I want us to be able to have one meal together, all of us, instead of having, and I haven't done this, by the way, for years, but instead of having children's meal and an adult meal. Yeah. So it's really interesting what you're saying also, that changing the whole environment around food and changing the relationship with food, and then you get to the food itself almost.
Absolutely, because we can get so caught up as parents in the day-to-day of making, supplying, clearing up meals, that's we rarely stick our head above that kind of parapet and go, the bigger picture is, I want my child, like you were saying, to grow up and be able to make independent, healthy choices and feel confident about new foods, and to eat this balance and variety, and to understand how to nourish their own bodies. When they're full, they can stop. When they're hungry, they can eat. Those are the skills, actual skills we want to teach, and they are skills that we need to learn. Eating is only a reflex up to 6 months, and after that it's a learned behavior. So it is our task. And to just go back to that literacy analogy I used at the start, I think I was so ill-equipped as a parent to teach that stuff. And certainly, if my child if it had been left to me without the support of teachers to teach my child to read and write fully, I don't know what would have happened. And I just think that these skills are so valuable for parents to learn, and I'm really glad to be able to talk about them actually and get the message out there.
Yeah, I think it's important too, because food is something so enjoyable. I mean, as I said, my eldest, she loves food. So we went to this pizza restaurant yesterday, and she didn't want pizza. She wanted a pasta dish. And she said to the lady serving us, "Can I have the pasta bolognese, but could I have mushrooms in it?" And the jaw of this woman, she's 8.5, right? This child, it just dropped. And she said, "Yes." I just looked at her. I knew why her jaw dropped. I said, "I know, it's great, isn't it?" She said, "I love mushrooms. I'm just shocked that you do too." And just like, "I love mushrooms." So she's like, "Absolutely, you can have mushrooms." And so I want that enjoyment of food for my child, for as many children as possible, because there's so much good food out there. And so I think it's so important. That's why I wanted to have you on as well. It's so important to share the message out there. There is something we can do. And obviously, as you said, my youngest might not grow up to be such a foodie, but it's just finding enjoyment in a slightly more varied diet than just, pizza and fish and chips, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we are eating more than that. So, but it's like, if there's a choice, those two will be the choices. But so obviously I know what I'm dealing with, and we've heard about and what you went through with your eldest daughter, but what results are the parents you work with, and what results are they getting? What are they experiencing?
Yeah. So, I mean, it varies very much depending on where the child is starting from. And we always, work obviously from that basis and meet the child where they're at. But sometimes the results can be very rapid and quite surprising for parents. So one of the things that we do early on when we're looking at the mealtime dynamic is talking about trying to serve more food in this sort of family style self-service way, so that the child is able to serve themselves. And, I've had clients where just that change alone has meant that their child starts helping themselves to vegetables and eating them. And these are vegetables that the parent would never have considered putting on the child's plate, because the child would have some point in the past said, no, I don't want to eat that. So yeah, opening up that possibility at first can get some quite quick results if the child is not perhaps, in too much of an extreme state with their eating. And for children who are a bit more cautious, though, it might take longer and smaller steps and smaller targets. So for instance, I had a client whose son had an illness as a child, and as a result was very unwilling to eat fruit, and particularly red fruits. In fact, when he saw a red fruit, he would shake and gag, and so he was really quite afraid of them. So it was working on that with her, looking for all different, there's many different techniques that I use with clients to help them start to get their child more exposed to these kinds of foods. Yeah, and sure enough, after I think about 7 weeks of working together, child was adding raspberries into smoothies and putting raspberries into desserts, and that was fantastic, given that at the start of working together he wouldn't go near them, wouldn't even look at them. So yeah, it depends what we're talking about, where we're starting from. But yes, progress definitely will happen. What it looked like for you and your child is individual, but yeah, definitely expect to make progress.
Oh, it's so amazing to hear, because the stress it causes when you think my child's not eating enough, or my child's not eating varied enough, and it's another thing that we as parents have to worry about, isn't it? And as you say, it often ends up being the simple solution of getting whatever beige food we can get ready-made from the shops, which is not helping our children in the long term, health-wise or otherwise. It really isn't. So just to know that there are things we can do to to help them feel more confident and happy around food. I just think it's so important, so important. I feel like there's so much I've forgotten, but I think if people want to get in touch with you, where's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so feel free to, I'm at Feel Better Families on social media, so feel free to message me there. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, or you can always drop me an email. I'm Sarah at Feel Better Families, and my website is feelbetterfamilies.co.uk. So again, there's ways of reaching me directly through my website too. And there's a free guide on there actually, which hopefully, you'll find useful, 5 steps to easier family meals. So yeah, some of the basic principles explained a bit more that we've talked about here today.
Oh, that's amazing. I need to go and have a look at that now. So feelbetterfamilies.co.uk.
That's me.
Fantastic. Is there anything I've forgotten?
Oh, I could bore on about this forever.
No,
so
but
don't give me the chance. No, don't give me the chance.
No. It's not boring. I think this is so important. And this show is called the Small Steps to Wellness Show, and it's initially for me was about what can I do to make to have a healthier life for me. But obviously we're all part of society and community, and a lot of us are parents, and we want what's best for our children, and sometimes we just don't know how to achieve that. And with the experiences you've had and the experiences I've had or are having, there's no ill intent from us when we try to say to our children, eat, you need to just eat. We want what's best for them, but it isn't probably the nicest way of getting our point across. So it's great to know that there's people out there like you who have the skill sets and the experience as well. I think is really important. So that we, to kind of empower us to make better choices. I just want really nice meal times, and the days where we have them is just amazing. So thank you so much for being on. As I said, this has been the Small Steps to Wellness show. If you want to find out what I'm up to, I'm also on Instagram on the Small Steps to Wellness. Thank you so much to my guest, Sarah Griffith, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. You've been listening to the Small Steps to Wellness show with Mari Craig. I am passionate about helping mums get their energy back through simple nutritional changes, because we know that if mummy is happy, the family is happy. If you would like to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram under @smallstepstowellness, or visit my website, smallstepstowellness.info. Speak to you soon.